In this video, we'll be finishing off the Augment tier list with the Prismatics, but if you haven't watched my Silver and Gold tier list videos, you should do that first, and I'll include the links in the description for you guys. Also, don't forget, like in every other tier list, we're going to be rating the augments within each tier, so the higher it is here, the better I think it is. And without further ado, we're going to start off with our first augment, which is Accelerating Sorcery, that when you cast an ability, you grant yourself 8 ability haste, and this effect stacks infinitely until the end of the round. Now, this, I think, is an OP early to mid augment, but it does fall off a bit in the late game. In the early to mid game, fights are a lot longer as damage isn't as high, so just being able to constantly use abilities to the point where you will actually just be in super Earth mode is absolutely ridiculous. It does fall off in the late game though, because if you just get one shot before you can use too many abilities, then Accelerating Sorcery just simply isn't that good. If you think about that gold augment that just gives you 60 ability haste, you have to consider that Accelerating Sorcery, you need to at least use 8 abilities to reach a similar level, and in the late game, using 8 abilities is actually kind of a big deal. Sure, you can try and spam them at the beginning of the fight, but if the enemies know that you are using Accelerating Sorcery, they're definitely going to try and chase you down and stop you from stacking it. Best champions for Accelerating Sorcery are champions that have a lot of CC or have a lot of survivability. Champions like Tarek could actually be good if you just constantly spam your Q, W, and E. The problem is you will actually eventually run out of mana. I know I have talked about in the past that it's very hard for you to run out of mana, but with Accelerating Sorcery and champions like that, mana does start to become a problem. So sure, you'll be able to use infinite abilities, but they will actually be able to kill you as you'll be able to use no abilities once you've run out of that mana. Next up, we have Back to Basics, and I like to consider this rune the Pantheon rune, as it gives you 35% increased damage, healing, and shielding, as well as 60 ability haste, but you can no longer cast your ultimate ability. And yeah, it is, in the case of Pantheon, pretty OP, because his ultimate is not very good on the map, but at the same time, it's nothing too crazy. The best part about it for a champion like Pantheon is the 35% increased damage and 60 ability haste, which is nothing to sneeze at. It's kind of hard to think of champions that would be okay with losing one of their abilities, because sure, you are losing your ultimate, which is usually your most important ability. I could see it being really strong on a champion like Udyr if he is given it, as you just don't use your Phoenix stance anymore and focus on the other abilities. So that would be quite a nice thing to have, and it would be extra good on Udyr because he would benefit from the healing and shielding with his turtle stance as well. A niche character that benefits from this is Blitzcrank, because you can still actually level up your ultimate, but you just can't cast it. The same thing with Pantheon, and both Blitzcrank and Pantheon have passives on their ultimates, and it does still work with Back to Basics, so Pantheon still does get the Armor Pen, and Blitzcrank does still get the passive Lightning Strikes, but that's not amazing, especially in the case of Blitzcrank, because he's just not a very strong champion. It's a good augment, but having to give up your ultimate is a pretty big price to pay. Next up, we have Blade Waltz, which will replace your Flea and give you old Fiora ultimate back in the day, which allows you to dash around the target enemy champion 8 times, dealing damage and applying on-hit effects at 50% effectiveness for each dash, and it grants you what is the most important thing, untargetability. So it's kind of like a Zhonya's, which also does damage, and I think this is just consistently good. You can pretty much take it on any damage dealing character to help you survive against like a big bursty ability or some like CC chain that they're trying to do. Now, the reason why it isn't in like the niche tiers is you can actually take it on a lot of champions. One that I had it on was Omni Soul, and I had a lot of burn items, and a fight was really close, and I was able to pop my Blade Waltz, which dealt a little bit more damage to the enemy, and more importantly, gave me that untargetability, so that the burn items could finish them off, and I could win the fight, so it is good in that case. I believe it works with things like Vayne W, which is absolutely insane, so you can take Blade Waltz and pop it, and get a couple procs of your W off, which is just very nice in general. The only reason it's not higher is because the damage isn't too crazy, and I think there are just better Prismatic Augments out there. Editor Borax the Mighty here, using my really terrible microphone because the other one is just not working for some reason. But I just wanted to say that it is important to remember that Blade Waltz does proc on hits at 50% effectiveness. So if you have a lot of those, then Blade Waltz is even better. Now we have Can't Touch This, which when you cast your ultimate, it grants you invulnerability for 2 seconds. And honestly, this does sound pretty good. Being invincible to damage is not a bad thing to have. The only problem with this augment is, like, who do you take it on? Because it's a bit difficult to actually, like, use your ultimate in order to try and be invincible to other people. If you think about it, like, a champion that would be good with this is Kennen, but Kennen builds Zhonya's anyways, so you'd rather usually just have a different prismatic augment than giving you, like, a kind of like Zhonya's effect. I mean, it is good that you can still move and use other abilities, but it's nothing too crazy. You also have to really remember that you do have this ability and you can't like just waste your ultimate. You have to like time it really well. So like something like a Renekton ultimate, normally you would want to use at the beginning of the fight to stack up Furry, but then you would just waste the invulnerability. And then do you really want to like use Renekton ult right before you like get popped by a Zed ultimate? It just becomes like a very weird situation. It's not bad on like the Shapeshifter champions or Karma, but like for instance, even with Karma, sure, you'll get a bunch of instances where you're invulnerable, but then you have to think about the whole time that you like don't want to use your ultimate ability because you don't want to waste the invulnerability on it. But then you're just kind of like not using a big part of Karma's kit if you're constantly thinking about it. So I think it is useful, but honestly it is pretty surprisingly weak in my opinion. A lot of champions that would want to use this already have like ways to keep themselves safe. For instance, like Vayne, she has her invisibility from her ultimate. Like Kai'Sa, she gets out of trouble when you use it. Kog'Maw just has way better like augments. So I don't really see many use cases for Can't Touch This, which prevents me from placing it any higher. Next up we have Chauffeur, which is one of the most interesting augments in the entire game. It pretty much just turns your character into Yuumi, and it grants you 100 ability haste and 50% bonus attack speed, as well as granting your ally 100% of your bonus movement speed. So it just makes like one character really fast, and it gives you a bunch of buffs. And also when you use a dash or blink spell, it attaches you for 1.5 seconds before attaching you back to your ally. So you can like flash a bit, and then you'll come back to the character that you're attached to, or you can like use a Hecarim ult and then you'll fly back. And honestly, this augment is just game defining, but it is very specific on what champions you do want to take this on. Now, the best combos I've seen with Chauffeur are going to be just your simple ADCs and enchanters. And don't think that it's always the enchanter that has to take Chauffeur. No, actually the ADC can take it very easily, because then simply you have your support running around with the extra bit of bonus movement speed, and you will be the ADC on top of them, just getting yourself 50% bonus attack speed, absolutely shredding someone. So you can like play like Lulu Kog'Maw, and the Lulu will just be running around while the Kog'Maw spits at them. You can have Twitch just running around with his ultimate as the support is trying to kite, which isn't bad at all. Now, the difference between this augment and Yuumi in general is you can still be targeted, so that can be a bit scary, but it is still so strong. One of the best combos I've seen with Chauffeur is simply Nilah plus Sona, because Nilah wants to jump in and then she'll be separated from her Sona, as the Sona can't keep up in certain cases. But with Chauffeur, the Nilah jumps in and brings the Sona along with her, so Sona can still shield and buff the Nilah, and then Nilah can absolutely shred them. So there's just so many characters that can use Chauffeur to really powerful effects. But besides those characters, the augment is definitely one of the worst and a good way to troll your entire game. But in the cases it is really strong, then it is just simply really strong. Another thing that you have to think about with Chauffeur is if you are the carry that does take it, if your teammate dies, you still do keep the 100 ability haste and 50% bonus attack speed, I believe. So that is a good way for you to potentially still win fights even if your teammate is dead. There are also cases where you can take double Chauffeur, as the enchanter will love having the 100 ability haste and the ADC will love having the 50% bonus attack speed, and that is just a nightmare to deal with. Now, the next augment we have is Circle of Death, and what it does is that healing you do causes you to deal 40% of that value in magic damage to the nearest enemy champion. And honestly, this should be called the Elite 500 augment, as he made it famous when he was playing Mordekaiser, and he created a build that he calls the Holy Paladin Mordekaiser. But honestly, the footage from the game is a little confusing, as it looks kind of bugged. I don't really know what is happening. I've played Circle of Death myself, and I have not done nearly as much damage as I was seeing. If you look at this footage, you can see what is about to happen to this Trundle. He pops Mikhail's in order to heal himself, and he gets 1,368 healing, and then all of a sudden, Trundle just dies. You can see that Mordekaiser is getting 2,481 healing, but the damage that the Trundle is taking is just absolutely insane. He's taking like 738 plus 266 true damage. Maybe Trundle has Death Dance. I just realized that that could be the true damage. Then he's doing like another 1,521 damage somewhere. So if this healing of 2,481, it should be doing half of that, like 50%. So it should be doing like 1,200 damage. But the numbers we're seeing here are like much higher. I mean, sure, he might be doing it also like with his other abilities, but it just seems like absolutely crazy how much damage he's doing. Like, even he can't believe it. I think another thing they changed with the rune is that you actually don't get the damage if you're healing when you shouldn't be healing. Like, here you can see he's at full maximum health, and he's about to use his W shield, which will heal him. So you can see, like, he gets the heal, but he actually doesn't get any heal. But the Jax is still taking 483 damage from the supposed heal. So that's another way that they nerfed the Augment. Here again, we can see in this clip, he's at maximum health at 6,010. And he just pops his heal, and it does 2,455 damage. Just his W shield heal, which would mean that his heal would have actually been 5,000 damage, which I don't really know how he's getting 5,000 healing from his W. You can see, like, here it says he's healing 419, but he's doing 2,455 damage with the Augment. I just don't really know how that's working. I mean, yes, I know he has full healing items, and that's good and all, but 5,000 healing when technically he's like barely healing. So I think they definitely changed it. Like, you can see he's only missing 8 health, so I think now it does like 4 damage, or they even nerfed it. I think it does like 40%, but that is absolutely insane. And here he uses Mikhail's on his Trundle, it looks like, to deal 387 damage, and I don't think Trundle was hurt for like 800 health, so I think then again it is a little bit wonky when the Augment was first seen as being really OP, and then he ults the Callista, and again you can see they're both relatively full health, but just from the ult it heals the Trundle, it looks like, for 329, heals the Mordekaiser a little bit, but the Augment itself is dealing 441 damage. So yeah, I don't really know how it's dealing that much damage. And then all of a sudden the Callista just absolutely gets evaporated. I mean, yes, the redemption looks like it was used right here, which is something, but there's no way redemption should be doing this damage when you're using it here. Again, I think they changed it so that it actually has to be healing that you need to be done. So here you can see that Mordekaiser healed for 37 in this instance, so I think the Augment will be doing 15 damage and not the 914 plus 489 true damage we see in this instance. And what's even crazier is it zapped the Ivern as well. Yeah, here it's doing 1,202 damage when he's only healing 182 to the Trundle. So, well, yes, it is absolutely hype and absolutely awesome. I do think that there was a lot of bugs. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they didn't actually change it. Now, it is absolutely awesome that that did exist. It is really interesting and cool to see, but I had to make a deep dive of it because I'm only going to put it in useful but weak because I played it as Sona relatively recently, and while Sona is healing a bunch, I just wasn't doing nearly as much damage as in those clips. I do think they changed it so that it is only the healing you are actually doing. As you can see right here, it says healing replenishes a unit's current health but never above their maximum health. And it looked like it was using healing as if it was the maximum value of the healing. And I do think that they did change that. Maybe I am completely wrong though, and that you still do get the damage from healing even when you don't need it. So then in that case, it would be game defining. It would be absolutely bonkers, as you saw from that Mordekaiser clip. There's not really anything you can do to play against it. So yeah, the strength of this augment is purely based on interactions. If it does count the excess healing that you wouldn't need, it is going to be a lot stronger. It's going to be stronger with the other healing augments. But if it is working as I believe it wants to work, then I do think it is actually kind of weak for a Prismatic Augment. Next up, we have Courage with the Colossus, which used to be a rune in the game. And what it does is, when you immobilize an enemy champion, you grant yourself a shield that absorbs 200 plus 6% maximum health damage. And honestly, this is just a fine augment. It's good on tanks that have immobilizations, but you really want like damage augments in Prismatic, or something that'll really change the outcome of a fight. Courage of the Colossus just helps you survive a little bit better, but if you're just like gaining shields occasionally, it doesn't really excite me too much because it doesn't increase your damage at all or your teammates' damage. So unless you do have some kind of unkillable comp or like cheesy comp where you're relying on the end zone to kill people, or like an infinite CC chain combo, then Courage of the Colossus is just simply fine and nothing too crazy. Now we have Dashing, where your movement abilities gain 150 ability haste, and this is definitely OP on the right characters. Champions like Fizz get his Q and E will all of a sudden have 150 ability haste. This is really strong on a champion like Fiora, where you're just constantly queuing people on no cooldown. That is absolutely insane. It's really good on a champion like Riven, who has her Q and her E. It is very, very strong, but the number of champions that can use it are a bit limited, and it is at the strongest moment in the early stages of the game, as other augments have higher highs, in my opinion, or like scale better. So it's definitely not like a game-defining augment, but it is very consistently strong, as it just does what it does very effectively. Now we have another augment that affects movement abilities with Earthwake, where your movement abilities leave behind a trail that detonates after 1 second, dealing damage. And as you can see, at level 18, it does 1500 damage, and it scales with your bonus AD and AP, and my lord, is Earthwake so strong if your champion can use it. Pretty much all the champions I mentioned in Dashing are good with Earthwake, maybe not the Fiora, but a champion like Silas is insane with both Dashing and Earthquake because it affects your E and your W. It's really good on LeBlanc because the first part of your W counts and then the second part of your W counts for Earthquake. It's very good on the Fizz again. It's very good on Riven once again as her Q and E, and you can like CC people to keep them in the Earthquake zone. So yeah, it has the potential to be very strong. I just realized it's called Earthwake, not Earthquake, but you do have to be close to people in order for it to be effective. And that's the problem with it, that people with like more range than you or the ability to kite could just outplay the Earthwake, and then you could be in for a rough time. But if you do hit them with the damage, it is absolutely nutty. Next up, we have Eureka, where you gain ability haste equal to 20% AP. And this is just a consistently good augment if you have a lot of AP. Ability haste is nice as you can make you use more abilities. If you have like 500 AP, then you'll have 100 ability haste, which is no joke. If you get up to like 1000 AP, then you'll have 200 ability haste, which is getting to pretty insane tiers. I don't think it is as strong as other augments. I think it's more consistent than these augments if you are a champion that has AP, and it's just something I enjoy utilizing. It's a very good augment on like the tanky champions that can build AP, like Alistar and a Mumu, or maybe even like a Leona, because then you can just go for a full AP build, but then constantly use your spells to CC people and damage them where they won't be able to do much in response. Now we have Feel the Burn, which replaces your Flee with a new summoner spell called Feel the Burn, and what it does is it casts both Exhaust and Ignite on all enemy champions within 1000 units. And initially I was going to rate it pretty low But the more I thought about it, I actually realized that in certain situations, it can be very OP. If you're playing against champions like Kennen, Syndra, Zed that have like really big combos, then the exhaust can actually be a huge deal, as you can just reduce the damage that they are going to be dealing in that combo by 35%, which is no joke. Also, having the ignite is not bad for the grievous wounds in the late game, and the damage itself is okay in the early parts of the game. It's definitely not the best augment, and I believe you might even be able to QSS it. I'm not 100% sure, and if you do, then you're just down a Prismatic Augment, which does really suck. But the champions that do want to do like these big combo plays usually don't build that item, like the Kennen, like the Syndra. So in those niche scenarios, Feel the Burn can be alright. It's really going to be purely depending on who you're playing against if you do want that exhaust. But if the enemy champions wouldn't really be affected by it, then definitely do not take Feel the Burn, as it will be almost useless. Now we have Goliath, which is one of my favorite prismatics and one of the more simple ones, as it grants you 35% bonus health, 15% adaptive force, and 50% increased size. And this is just a consistently good augment. Pretty much if you see this, you can almost always take it. The health is very good if you're playing a tank, especially if you have other health augments, as it really enhances your ability to be an unstoppable force. Speaking of force, the fact that it is adaptive is nice if you see Goliath and your other options are bad, because it definitely doesn't have the same peaks as other augments. But if you do see it and your other options don't really work for you, then Goliath is definitely something that you can consider taking and does feel quite decent, and something that you wouldn't always want to re-roll if you do have it as an option. Next up is Infernal Conduit, where your abilities apply a burn for 5 seconds that deals damage per second over the duration, and this burn stacks infinitely and refreshes with each application. And this is definitely game defining. If you are a burn champion or a champion that constantly has like an ability that does damage to people, then Infernal Conduit is just insane. I also believe it gives you cooldown reduction that isn't listed here. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think it does based on like the burn damage that you are doing. And yeah, if you have like Leandry's Anguish or Demonic Embrace, Infernal Conduit is just absolutely insane and very powerful. Definitely game defining. As you'll see, it'll be dropping down in the tier list, as I think that the burn champions are not the best, but it is very strong on those specific champions. Now we have the augment, which completely changes the game in Jeweled Gauntlet, where your abilities can critically strike for 140% damage, and additionally you gain critical strike chance. And if you're an AP champion, you might be thinking, oh, this isn't that good, but you do get more critical strike chance based on how much AP you have, and there is an AP crit item in Arena. Now, Jeweled Gauntlet is just insane. There are so many champions that can utilize this well. It also affects all of your abilities. There's so many different combos I've seen with Jeweled Gauntlet. There's a Lucian one-shot build using Jeweled Gauntlet and his ultimate to just absolutely melt people. Every time I talk about a character being bad, someone mentions, oh, but it's really good with Jeweled Gauntlet, like Aatrox or Akali and stuff like that. So yeah, Jeweled Gauntlet, if you see it and you're like a damage dealing champion, then my god, is it so strong. I even took it on Rel randomly because she has decent AP scale lanes, and I built like a full AP kind of like crit build, and I was absolutely chunking people and doing more damage than my carry. So yeah, if you're a champion that has a lot of abilities that deal damage, Jeweled Gauntlet is absolutely freaking insane and something you should be looking out for. The existence of something like Jeweled Gauntlet really puts all of the other prismatics in perspective, because the entire game changes if you get Jeweled Gauntlet. The chances of your opponents starts to diminish, while some of these other augments, like Colossus, if I see it, I'm not like, oh no, the game's gonna be way harder. But if I see someone with Jeweled Gauntlet, I am starting to sweat a little bit. Now we have a very weird augment in Mad Scientist, where at the start of each combat round, you either gain 30 bonus attack damage, 20% bonus health, and 30% increased size, or 70 ability haste, 30% bonus movement speed, and 30% reduced size. The first part of Mad Scientist is very good, where you're gaining 20% bonus health, and you're gaining the 30% bonus attack damage. But if you compare it to something like Goliath, where you're gaining 35% bonus health, so 15% more, and you're still gaining 15% adaptive force, so you're pretty much just trading bonus health for damage. So Goliath is just simply way better on tank champions than Mad Scientist is. And it's also weird that Mad Scientist says it's only 30% bonus attack damage. I'm assuming that maybe this is wrong. I can't really know for sure. Maybe it is adaptive force, but if it was, then it is a bit better. But still, Goliath is just superior if you think about it in the first instance. Now, if you look at the second part of Mad Scientist, you actually can start realizing that it's pretty trash. It gives you 70 ability haste and 30% bonus movement speed, as well as 30% reduced size. And there's that gold augment that just gives you 60 ability haste. So pretty much just think, do you really want a prismatic that, compared to a gold augment, only gives you 10 more ability haste and that 30% bonus movement speed? It's pretty terrible if you roll that second part. And the 30% reduced size, sure, it can help you like dodge abilities, but a lot of the damage you'll be taking is just from auto attacks, so that doesn't really matter at all. With that all being said, it is useful, but it's just simply weak. You almost always rather have the first part of the augment, and then if you think about it, it's just in some cases worse than Goliath, so that's not very good. And then if you get the second part, you're just actually sad because it's just pretty much that gold augment but slightly better, and I don't think it is deserving of a prismatic augment slot, or at least make it so that the first part is as strong as Goliath and the second part gives you a bit more stats, maybe like some attack speed or something. I don't know. It's an interesting concept, but I just think that the RNG element is definitely a bit of a scare for me, and the fact that it's just not that strong in general is not great. Now we have Master of Duality, where your basic attacks grant you ability power, and your ability hits grant you bonus attack damage. And this effect stacks infinitely until the end of the round. Now, Master of Duality is absolutely bonkers on the characters that can use it. There's champions like Kog'Maw, Kayle, Kai'Sa, even Vayne. Now, these champions all have mixed damage in their kits, and there's definitely going to be more. Varus is another one that's really good with Master of Duality. Then if you look at the items of Arena, you realize that a bunch of them are scaling with both AP and AAD. You have Ginsu's Rage Blade, you have Kraken Slayer, even an item like Nashor's Tooth they gave AD scaling to. And with all of that, Master of Duality just becomes so powerful if you are able to get some auto attacks off. It's really good in the early and mid game like this one, as you are just scaling so heavily. Like if you're playing Kayle, you can actually win the early game because Kayle can just be basic attacking people, and then her W heal is actually insane because of how much AP you will be getting. I do think it is weaker than something like Jeweled Gauntlet because it does require you to be hitting people or using your spells. It's really good on a map with like Set in it, for instance, because you're going to be stacking up your Master of Duality on it. But if a champion has Jeweled Gauntlet and just one-shots you, a champion I'm just thinking of right now is like Kha'Zix with Jeweled Gauntlet. It's just absolutely insane, because if they're ever isolated for some reason, your Q literally one-shots them. So yeah, there's not really much you can do when someone one-shots you. And for that reason, it is down here, but by no means is it weak. It is absolutely insane and the best on-hit augment that you can get. Now we have Mystic Punch, where your basic attacks reduce your total cooldowns by 1 second. And it is a very good early to mid-game augment, and it does fall off a bit in the late game, because Mystic Punch is actually pretty decent on tanky champions, where you can like do your CC combo, and then you'll be doing a bit of auto attacks, and then you're getting those CC abilities back again. But in the late game, you are weaving in less and less of those auto attacks, and you have to like make fights faster, so Mystic Punch isn't as good. It's okay on like on-hit champions, but they'd much rather have something like Master of Duality. It's like no comparison, the two. So yeah, Mystic Punch, it's alright. It doesn't really increase your damage. It's decent on champions like Fiora and Jax, and making them more like a Master Yi champion, but it definitely doesn't have the same high highs that the game-defining augments have. Now we have the augment with the coolest art in Omni Soul, And I think because of the art, many people are taking it. But if you actually look at the power of the Dragon Souls, which I did before I made this video, they are just terrible. Like, they are definitely not on Prismatic Augment scale. Like, if you get Infernal Soul, you do a little bit of damage. If you get Hextech Soul, you get like a little bit of a slow and damage. So the numbers are way too low on the Dragon Souls. It's just so bad. It's like, this could honestly be a gold augment almost. Like, you can also get bad RNG. You can get Cloud Soul, which just gives you movement speed and more movement speed on your ultimate, which is good on certain champions, but on certain champions it's bad. There's very, very few times you take Omni Soul. The only reason you would ever actually take it is if the other two options are unusable. Like, if you're a champion that doesn't have dashes, then you can take Omni Soul. Like, that's why it's in useful but weak tier, because it is always going to be useful, but my god, it is a low roll game if you are stuck with Omni Soul. Then comes Quantum Computing, which is a very cool sounding augment and very cool looking augment when it is in effect. What it does, it automatically slashes in a circle around you over 0.75 seconds, and it deals a good amount of damage to champions on the outer edge. And additionally, the cooldown of all your automatic augments are now affected by ability haste. One augment I know that this would affect is like Trueshot Barrage, I believe. There's definitely going to be others, but I can't really think of them now. Quantum Computing is very good in the early to mid game. It just gives you a whole another layer of damage on bruisers, and it is very noticeable. If you get a lot of cooldown reduction, that will actually affect Quantum Computing, and you'll be constantly using its effect. I do think it falls off in the late game as like range champions become stronger and stronger, as they might be able to kill you before you get multiple procs of Quantum Computing off, and Quantum Computing just simply doesn't do enough damage to keep up with the hyper scaling champions that are strong in the late game. And also, like, let's say you are playing against tanks, then the tanks are just going to be in your face, ignoring the Quantum Computing damage, so it's not very good in that case either. Speaking of tanks, we have the most insane tank augment in Slow Cooker, which surrounds you in flames, causing you to apply a burn every second to enemies within 500 units for 5 seconds that deals magic damage every second equal to 0.5% of the target's maximum health over the duration. This burn stacks infinitely and refreshes with application. Now, again, it is confusing the way it's worded, where it says 0.5% of the target's maximum health, but that means your maximum health, not the enemy that you're going for. So if you get some health augments, Slow Cooker becomes insane. If you have something like Heartsteel, Slow Cooker is absolutely crazy, as you'll be getting a bunch of extra health thanks to the Heartsteel. And honestly, Slow Cooker enables tanks to win games where they might not be able to normally. A lot of people are talking about how strong Dr. Mundo is, and he is definitely alright, but with something like Slow Cooker, I agree. He is absolutely OP. You can just be healing a bunch, and while the healing might not matter if you're playing against people who do a bunch of damage and can outlast the healing, Slow Cooker makes it so that you are dealing a bunch of damage to them. If you can keep hitting cleavers and keeping them within your range, then the Slow Cooker will really scale up. Because if you think about it, it's not that it's doing 0.5% of your target's maximum health. It's doing that in the first instance, and then as you stay on them more and more and more and more, it's starting to do just insane amounts of damage, where you can get it to be doing like 10% of your maximum health damage over 5 seconds to people. Yeah, it's just absolutely insane. If you are playing a mega tank like Ornn, Dr. Mundo, Leona, so you can keep in their range, then Slow Cooker will make you deal the most damage in the fights and can help you win it. It's also good on a champion like Singed, where you kind of like want to go in and out, and you can like keep them barely in the range of the Slow Cooker, so that you're stacking it up and then using like Rylai's to make it so they can't hit you, and you can win the fight in that way. Now we have Spirit Link, which redirects 40% of the damage dealt to your ally to you, and you heal yourself equal to 40% of the healing they receive. And yeah, this is a very strong augment, pretty much game defining as well, like all of these other ones. It's very good if you are playing like an Omega tank like Dr. Mundo again. It's very good on enchanters, because you not only will help your carry stay alive, but when you heal your carry, then you yourself will actually be getting 40% of that healing, which is very nice. Spirit Link is very good to take if you're playing alongside a champion that just has a lot of natural healing. Like if you're playing alongside a Warwick, for instance, you'll be gaining a part of the heal that he's getting from his auto attacks, from his Q, from his ultimate, which is definitely very nice. It's very good if you're playing alongside like a Mordekaiser, as he can go for that heal build, and then you'll be gaining some of that healing as well. So Spirit Link could honestly be higher. These augments are all insane. So don't be surprised if you lose to someone with one of these other augments. I think the top 3 augments, where JG is one of them, is definitely something that transcends maybe these. So yeah, Spirit Link, very, very strong. Definitely should look out to take it. If you watch my gold tier list, then you know that I really did not enjoy any of the keystone augments. Now we have Symphony of War, which does give you the best keystones in this game mode in Conqueror and Lethal Tempo. And honestly, it's just fine. The biggest problem with it is that you do need to ramp it up. Like, you need to be hitting them in order to get the Conqueror and Lethal Tempo going. So in the early to mid game, it's okay because you are more likely able to do that. But in the late game, if someone has like JG and they're just jumping on you, then Symphony of War literally doesn't do anything. The only reason it's in fine and not useful but weak is because, I mean, you can take it on a lot of champions and it's going to be okay. It can honestly be one of the better augments for certain bruisers like Trundle or Set, but those champions in general are kind of weak to begin with, so definitely not the best. It's alright on something like Jax or Fiora, but they simply have better augments usually than Symphony of War. Speaking of an augment that would be better than Symphony of War for Jax and Fiora, we have Tap Dancer, where your basic attacks grant 10 bonus movement speed, stacking infinitely until the end of the round, and additionally you gain bonus attack speed equal to 10% movement speed. Now, Tap Dancer is really good in the early game because people are trying to kite you, run away, and you can be autoing them, gaining all that movement speed, chasing them down. It falls off pretty heavily in the late game because the chances of you auto-attacking people becomes less and less. And while it's good on like ADCs that want to like kite you pretty heavily, I don't think it's as good as Master of Duality, as it just gives you way more damage. If you're able to kite with movement speed, then you probably would be able to do it regardless if you have Tap Dancer or not, as you just want to try not to get locked down in the first instance. So Tap Dancer, very good early game, very good mid game, but I do see it falling off in many cases in the late game. I had it recently as Skarner, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. I'm like catching up to people. I'm like beating them down, but then they build like one QSS, and then they just kite me to death. And I never really get to use the Prismatic Augment of Tap Dancer, which is not very ideal. We had Shrink Ray in the gold augment tier list, which was an old TFT item, but now we have a current TFT item in Thief's Glove, which removes all your current items, and at the start of each combat round, gain random items instead, with the stats and damage of these items being increased by 30%. Now, I absolutely adore Thief's Gloves. I take it way, way too often, and every time I do take it, I laugh to myself as you just get absolutely trolled by Riot Games. It's really good in the early to mid game, as you'll be up an item against everyone else because that's how Thieves Gloves works, and you get like random Ornn items in certain situations, and having all the stats being increased is really good, and you could get RNG where you're just going to be absolutely unstoppable and will guaranteed win the fight. The only problem with Thieves Glove is at the end of the game when everyone has 6 items, and most people have 6 items that synergize with all of their augments, synergize with one another, and you'll instead be playing Sejuani with Bloodthirster, Randuin's Omen, Yumu's Wake, which is an Ornn item, Black Cleaver, Heartsteel with 0 procs, and Infinity Edge. So yeah, the only resistances I have against a full AP A-Soul was Randuin's Omen of 60 armor, which isn't good. I mean, I had a lot of health, but they're just gonna shred through that. So yeah, you just get absolutely trolled because, I mean, Sejuani does scale with AP, but they just gave me only AD items and health items. So while it is so much fun, I have to put it here. It's really bad. I do kind of think it might be better than the Dragon Souls because you could get really lucky if you get insane items. Like, let's say I got a bunch of, like, MR items on Sejuani. Or how in the round before, I actually got 5 Ornn items as Sejuani. And then it was alright, but in the last round, I just got absolutely garbage. So I could see that Thief's Glove could be getting better and better as they buff it more and more, but they've already been buffing it a ton, which just shows you how terrible it is. It is definitely the most fun augment on the Prismatic list, but my lord, it is so inconsistent and going to be the reason you lose a lot of games if you do take it. Now we have Trueshot Prodigy, which when you damage an enemy from over 700 units away, which is a pretty big distance. I took this on Dr. Mundo, and like full max range Q is 700 units, but anything lower than that is not. Anyways, if you do hit them further than that range, then you get the Ezreal's Trueshot Barrage in that direction, which deals a lot of damage base, and it scales really well with your bonus AD, and especially with your AP to any enemies that are hit, and it's only on a 5-second cooldown. Honestly, this augment is pretty freaking insane. It deals a lot of damage. The biggest problem with it is the fact that it needs to be 700 units away, so if people are like jumping on top of you as fast as they can, then Trueshot Prodigy literally won't do anything, and that absolutely sucks. There's a lot of champions you can like do a cheesy style to get the damage because it only needs to be any sort of damage. So like burn items are really good with Trueshot Prodigy because if you get one proc, you can start like running away and you might be able to get like 2 Ezreal ults on top of them, which is very nice. Like for instance, when I did play that Dr. Mundo, I would hit them with a Q and I had Demonic Embrace and then I would run away and then the Ezreal ult would shoot out at them. It's really good on the trap champions like Teemo and Shaco because you can like throw out your traps, and if they do fall for it, they will be hit by a Trueshot Barrage, which again does a billion damage. Another problem with it is though that it can be juked. So if you have like Rylai's with Trueshot Prodigy, that's definitely a very good combo. It's also really good with OK Boomer, I've discovered, and Rylai's because it scales well with magic damage, and you can hit them with the OK Boomer. You can get slowed by the Rylai's, and then Trueshot Prodigy can shoot out afterwards for an absolutely devastating combo. I'm going to put in the OP early mid-game tier right here, meh late, because it does really struggle against champions that just want to jump in your face to melt you. It also doesn't do any like percent max health damage, so tanks can be a bit annoying if they are just constantly the one who are activating the proc of Trueshot Prodigy. If you can kite back though, then this augment is absolutely insane. Really good with like Heimerdinger, Zyra teams that just want to like control the middle and then like poke out with Trueshot Prodigy. So by no means is it weak. Don't think that. I don't think it's as game defining as the augments up here though, because there are good ways you can play around it. Next up we have Ultimate Revolution, that when you cast your ultimate ability, it resets its cooldown, and this may only occur once per combat round. And it is absolutely bonkers. There are some champions that really revolve around their ultimate. Champion like Annie, for instance, is absolutely insane because yes, she does get 2 Tibbers from this, as well as like 2 Tibbers damage. So Ultimate Revolution Annie, absolutely busted. It's good on Ivern because you can get 2 Ivern Daisies. It's not as good as the Annie because the Annie like does so much damage. It's good on something like Kennen because you can like ulti once, ulti again. It's really good on something like a Mumu if you want to go like full AP because you can like hit 1 Q, ulti them, hit your other Q, then ulti again for a very devastating combo. Something like full lethality Jarvan, Zed, just pretty much any champion that revolves around their ultimate Revolution is insane on. So good. Next up we have Windspeaker's Blessing, that your heals and shields also grants the target a bit of bonus armor and bonus magic resistance. And truthfully, this is very useful. It is nice to get that bonus armor and bonus magic resistance, especially on targets that don't have any, as it will make a pretty big difference. It's really funny, it's coming after Ultimate Revolution, where I'm talking about like, look at these like insane combos you can do, where you get like double Annie ults, double Zed ults. So to immediately then talk about getting 105 armor and magic resistance at level 18, which you won't be at usually. So like, let's say you get 90 armor and bonus magic resistance, and then you can think there's like a bunch of augments that shred these resistances. There's like items that shred it. Pretty much, I think it's really weak. If I'm playing a character and I end up taking this, I'm kind of just depressed. It's just not very exciting. I don't think it's powerful enough to be a prismatic. Like, think about it. If this was a gold augment and somebody took it, would you be like, this is so insane, I can't play against this at all? It might be like a little bit too like high at the numbers, but besides that, you're not like really scared of this augment. I am putting it above Thieves Glove. It could honestly be like somewhere here, but I just think that Thieves Glove has the potential to have higher highs, while this one is consistently below average compared to all the other prismatics. I feel bad for Windspeaker's Blessing because it comes right after Ultimate Revolution, and then it comes right before what I consider to be the best augment, which is Wisdom of Ages. And what Wisdom of Ages does, it grants you 1 level and an additional level every other round, and most importantly, it removes the level cap. Now, this augment is pretty much only good in the very first rotation, but I think that's the most important time for any augment, as that can really define your whole game. If you do see it in the first rotation, you pretty much take it on every single character, because, I mean, levels are just absolutely insane. It gives you more health, it gives you more stats, it's just absolutely bonkers. And the fact that you can go above level 18 is insane. Like in this fight, we had to fight against a level 24 A-Soul when we were level 18, which does make a pretty big difference. You also reach level 16 when everyone else is level 13, I believe, which is a huge deal because you get your 3rd level of ultimate while everyone else still is on their 2nd level of ultimate, which is absolutely massive. I put Wisdom of Ages above these 2 augments because I do think that these augments do have higher highs, but you actually like have to play well in order to utilize it, and not every champion can use these as effectively. While Wisdom of Ages is brain dead, you don't need to do anything special. You are just going to be stronger than everyone else in the lobby, and it is very good in the late game. It is fine in the early game, and just very consistently OP. So yeah, so strong. The final augment we have on this entire journey is Zhonya's Epiphany. And what it does is it replaces your Flea with a special type of Zhonya's that gives you the normal effect of stasis for 3 seconds. But the big difference that I didn't actually know, because I never read the full text, is that afterwards it resets the cooldown of all your basic abilities. So Zhonya's Epiphany is pretty strong because Zhonya's in general is just very good in this game mode. You can still build normal Zhonya's, and there's some characters that just want to get that reset on their cooldowns. I was talking to my friend about this, and he was saying that it could be really good on someone like Fizz, and yeah, I mean, that sounds absolutely insane. You could do like your QWE, giving you that invincibility with the E, then you can Zhonya's Epiphany, and then when that runs out, you get all of your cooldowns back, where you can then QWE again, and then you can normal Zhonya's. So yeah, that'd be very annoying to deal with, and could be strong. The only thing is, I don't think it's as good as a lot of the other augments up here, as it doesn't give you any bonus damage. So sure, you might be able to get your cooldowns back, but if someone is just way stronger than you in the moment, then that won't really change the outcome of the fight. As you can see, I have been a bit of a mess being sick and trying to get all this content out for you guys. But I've really enjoyed being able to do all this research and give you guys my opinions on the augments. I want to do the same thing with the champions, but I still have a few that I haven't played, as I believe it is a good idea to play all the champions first before you rate them, so that you can avoid all of the honestly really terrible tier lists I have seen so far, which have been really frustrating. So yeah, once again, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for all the nice comments that I've seen. Make sure to leave it a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you want to see what I'm going to cook up for that champion tier list. And let me just say, it is going to make these augment tier lists look like child's play. Thanks for watching, everyone, and best of luck on your journeys in the arena.